presence. Was a global network with capital flowing through its circuitry. Death moves beyond filiation or desert as a process, as a state of mind, as a condition. In the rolling uncertainty of the questions that arise, the world offers us clues. Their intense focus augments the spaces that the forms take. Meanwhile, an ongoing series of harrowing close calls with extinction orients our daily life. Darnell's Journal, Visitations, Treasure Island Aftermaths. Darnell is a young naval officer back from Bikini Atoll, where the U.S. Navy conducted nuclear bomb detonation tests. Ed is his lover and commander. They've attempted to swim from Treasure Island to San Francisco to escape the psychiatric hospital the Navy incarcerated them in, only to get pushed back to Treasure Island by oceanic currents. My lungs filled with seawater. I saw Ed bobbing in the waves. He looked weak, stricken. Dark tendrils of bull kelp entwined his skull. The tide pushed me away from him. No matter how hard I tried, I could not navigate toward him. Eventually, I managed to crawl to shore. With the last energy I had, I dragged Ed onto the sand as far from the onrushing waves as I could. Delirious, I collapsed next to him. A woman emerged out of the forested park, came over, tried to revive us. Her demeanor was quiet, meditative. She sat in a vigil with us. In my delirious state, I remember I was grateful she didn't alert the police. She made me feel less vulnerable as I sat with her. She was protective. Then I must have blacked out. When I came to, there was a group of people encircling me. The woman was gone. These entities cast a glow, not a shadow. There was a luminescence that arose in our midst. My skin had a pearlescent sheen. The people crowded around sparkled also. I wasn't sure if they were singing softly, humming, or mumbling. A resonant frequency spread from the ocean through the atmosphere, through our bodies. Ed was unconscious. The group huddled around us. They were concerned for our well-being. Because of debilitation, there was sensory confusion. They appeared as flowers. As if a ring-shaped garden had grown up around us. The air was sweetly tinged. The pain I felt morphed into a dull throb that was endurable. I was listless, in a liminal state but alert. I questioned if they were human, but was unconcerned. I drifted into a dream state. Apparitions of benevolent flowers peopling the coastline brought relief. My thoughts had become wistful. Their presence ameliorated the stressfulness of the situation. Ed looked peaceful, though overcome by his condition. I leaned against him. I tried to keep his body warm. It put me at ease when I noticed he was breathing steadily. One of the flowery presences encircling us offered a gauzy scarf. I draped it over Ed. Another bent down, reached over, giving me a book. At the time, I didn't know what it was. It was wrapped in fibrous rope. It was large, an unusual shape. They placed it under my arm. I think I eventually rested my head on it. I didn't have the wherewithal to process the gesture. At that moment, the scenario changed. Everything took on stark contrast. The shimmery quality of the light disappeared. In the distance, on the water, was an ominous, monochromatic shape. The dark form congealed into a ship, none that I'd ever seen, ocean-bound, but I recognized it was a galleon. A Spanish flag flapped from its masthead. A dinghy came to shore. Gradations of form and color reappeared. Looking on from my vantage point, I could see several men in woolen knickers and top jackets, the color of the sky on the brightest day, accented in blood red with flashy gold buttons running down the front. Though they were dressed in spectacular fashion, I could smell their stench from where I was positioned. Their skin was oily leather that hadn't been washed for months. They approached the group of people that had gathered on the beach, all of whom were stunned by the approach of the galleon that was now anchored a distance away. Everyone then turned their attention to the boat that had landed on the shore, bringing forth so much commotion. I assumed the crowd on the beach were indigenous Indians. The dinghy went back and forth to the galleon, picking up and unloading people and eventually livestock onto the shore. Other small boats joined in, ferrying humans, animals, and supplies to land. There were cows, sheep, goats, pigs, and chicken. Most were hogtied. Other animals were in crates. The cacophony of noises was overwhelming. Smaller creatures, unintentional cargo, scurried to shore. Rats, mice, and lice, most notably. They were thrilled for a chance to set foot on land. The scene in front of me flickered. The atmosphere blurred. Cloud cover floated just above the cresting waves. Had it rained momentarily? I recall thunder, or was the noise the waves crashing against rocks? Temporality presented as jarring segments ricocheting along multiple axes. I did my best to seek grounding in the tumult of the emergent strata of time. My attention refocused again to the confluence of people assembled on the beachfront. The population density was larger. It must have been later on the same day or the following day. Now there were clergymen milling around, as well as the soldiers I had seen earlier. All I presumed were Spanish based on the flag that flew on the ship's mast. Their crew brought ashore paraphernalia for their missions, presarios, and pueblos. They yelled at the natives not to drop the wooden boxes they so prized. One Spaniard of the militia dropped his breeches and defecated on the sand. Several pissed in the wind. The clamor made the exchanges between the people indistinct, but I could hear an order made by one of the friars: raise all the trees. The imperial military and accompanying clergy were intent on clearing land for their agricultural pursuits. Their plan was nefarious. They intended to destroy the quality of life of the indigenous communities they came in contact with. Subsistence living involved a dependence on hunting and gathering. Raising forests and encouraging livestock to trample the land meant that hardships would follow for the indigenous communities who lived where the Spaniards intruded. Their mandate was to institute missions with the purpose of rounding up and relocating native people to become their slaves. The overriding objective of this imperial design was to instill a Christian worldview, stripping native people of their language, culture, and land. Violence and theft were the ways that they planned to accomplish their goals. Their grandiosity gave them great confidence. They believed they received the graces of an extraterrestrial father figure. With a clear conscience, they began to apply their blueprint for a new world order. Some of the Spaniards handed out beads and rosaries to a large group of coastal Miwok and Ohlone leaders. At this point, my sense of everything happening on the ocean front was vivid. I heard the name Father Pellew. Then I saw the man who bore that name. He was dressed in a priest's black robe that hid his ankles under thick woolen cloth. As his name was called out, a powerful image arose. Superimposed on Father Pellew's face was the faces of Charles III, Pius VI, and Maria Amelia of Saxony. The holograms moved in accordance with the priest. This triad of coiffure and jewelry overlaid the visage of Father Pellew. Stunned, I gasped when I noticed that the lips of Pius VI and those of Maria Amelia of Saxony were each as pouty and reddened as another. Each person milling about on the beach was a composite of many others. For several moments there was a layered quality to everyone I looked at. All were diaphanously superimposed. The luggage had been dragged ashore and 286 head of cattle were unloaded. The mission they had established was called Mission San Francisco de Assisi, named after the patron saint, St. Francis of Assisi, protector of animals. Some of their possessions were to be transported down Our Lady of Sorrows Creek. The bulk of their weaponry and tools followed. The last item to come out of the galleon was a massive carved image of Jesus on the cross, wearing a scanty loincloth, his forehead dripping with blood from the crown of thorns wedged into his glistening skin, his hands punctured through with hand-hewn nails. At every mission, death rates exceeded birth rates, sometimes by a ratio of 2 to 1. Where did this information come from? I knew so little about early native struggles with imperial occupiers. Horrific data bubbled up, and I could only equate it with a clairvoyant insight that arose in a place supercharged with consequence. The barrage of harrowing factuality caused a great disturbance within me. I vomited onto the sand. The word reduction reverberated in my skull like buckshot spray pelting a wooden target. Whispering voices swept through my consciousness. Phrases in several languages drifted into a chorus with the enunciation of waves, the cries of livestock, the gritty acoustics of boots on sand, and the rubbing tensions of the seismic plates. It became dark, and I began to smell the fumes of whale oil burning from the lamps the Spaniards lit. Ed was still curled on the beach next to me. I lifted myself up to be able to see how he was doing. His breathing was faint. Blood ran down his neck. The woman who had hovered around us earlier had briefly come back. She gave him CPR, or was that before? Had I replayed the memory? She left a fragrance in her wake that smelled of mulch and flowering lupine. Sirens and flashing lights approached again, confusing my sense of things. Someone was shot as they were being apprehended. The police chase culminated a ways away from us, but not far enough. The sirens sounded different, but I knew it was the police. I had seen the lights coming over the bridge toward Treasure Island. It was night. San Francisco sparkled like a distant galaxy in the night sky across the expanse of water. Absence. Bringing the focus to a nuclear center, a nuclear family. In your neighborhood, aspirations. Histories rise up through the floorboards. Roger, receive target. Those people. Come on, fire. Roger, clear. Engage, clear. Fire. Wheatley. What broke the peace and quiet of our domesticity was Wheatley's writing assignment. I got an email from his history teacher that stated Luke and I would need to set up a virtual conference call to discuss Wheatley's essay. He had been given an assignment to write about a street in the neighborhood. He had chosen the street we were soon going to move to, Underhill Ave. Wheatley's selection of Underhill Ave, where our new house was located, was a natural choice. He arrived at his decision instantly. Wheatley evidently plagiarized heavily directly from Captain John Underhill's journal, News from America. Captain John Underhill was the commander the street was named after. The plagiarism was pretty obvious because Wheatley included arcane English spellings typical of the 17th century British English. The sentences were cluttered with anachronistic language where me was spelled M-E-E and we appeared as W-E-E. In his journal, Underhill pondered grandiose questions like, what came we hither for else? Within the scope of a descriptive overview of conquest, it began, I shall, according to my abilities, begin with a relation of our warlike proceedings. Wheatley had verbatim lifted whole paragraphs from the captain's journal without stating that he had done so. Wheatley didn't actually understand the gist of the journal, what was described therein. His teacher advised that we help him translate the Old English into contemporary language so that he could work with the material to formulate a new version. He was allowed to resubmit the essay after making modifications using the information gleaned in the process. His history teacher was quite understanding and patient. Wheatley was not penalized. The teacher spared him any shame. We were told his essay would be reevaluated on the basis of the new version. We spent a weekend helping Wheatley do as required. The journal was somewhat convoluted to read because of the oddness of the language, but we found an online version of the journal where the Old English had been converted into modern phrasings, and we relied on it heavily. Luckily, it was only 20 pages long. An AI-powered summarizing tool to read and summarize its main points wouldn't be necessary. We helped Wheatley set his computer to text-to-speech so the journal would be read out loud by his PC. Wheatley had been thrilled that we were moving to a street that was named after an historically famous captain. He said to us, "Captains are important people. We are moving to a place of importance." He excitedly recalled scenes from the Marvel Cinematic Universe in which Captain Marvel is Carol Danvers, a female superhero, and also mentioned Captain Crunch, his favorite cereal that was sometimes all we could get him to eat. He began to see things differently once he learned of the exploits of Captain Underhill. We set him up alone in his room to hear the audio version of Underhill's journal read by the generated computer voice on his laptop. We suggested he take notes as he listened. Wheatley was in his room most of the Sunday before the due date. When Luke checked in to ask him how the essay was coming along and noticed Wheatley's tear-stained eyes and asked him what was the matter, Wheatley burst into uncontrollable sobs. It took a while to calm him down. Finally, when he was seated in the kitchen, he described to us how on May 26, 1637, under the direction of Captain Underhill and Major John Mason, the English militia entered the Pequot village Missatuck near the Mystic River at 2 a.m. and set it ablaze. Mostly women and children were sleeping there. Anyone who tried to escape was killed, shot point blank. The massacre killed more than 400 Pequot Indians. They also burned their storages of grain and anything of value that they came upon. In Underhill's journal, he is proud of the torching of the village and the subsequent maiming that he and his men undertook. Underhill felt that he had God's guidance and permission. Luke tried to comfort Wheatley by telling him that this event happened during a war, the Pequot War, a consequence of the English taking over Dutch domination of the region. and that Underhill and Mason had allies from the Mohican and Narragansett tribes with them when they stormed the palisade of the Pequot. Wheatley was not responsive to justification. He was devastated by what the journal had disclosed. For weeks he was despondent, barely participating in anything. Needless to say, he bombed the essay. He barely wrote anything, just a few sentences in raw form. Captain John Underhill and his men burned many innocent people alive, was the opening sentence of his essay. It went on, he burned a village of men, women, and children located near a river in Connecticut on May 26, 1637, and then he murdered other Indians in other places. I don't understand why, 385 years later, this street in Brooklyn is named after him. John Underhill and other militia from the Massachusetts Bay Colony had gone out to raid land suitable for new plantations. Underhill referred in his journal to the experimental discovery of such prized land that the Pequot Indians held and that the colonists wanted. So no, Underhill didn't refer to a geologic location, as in under a hill, as was Wheatley's first guess. Wheatley mentioned in his essay that the Indians of Massachusetts had given the white settlers a name, Wotoke-Nange, meaning cutthroats or stabbers because of their ruthlessness. Luke insisted he excise that paragraph. The whole episode was a cautionary tale about allowing the kids unlimited access to the internet and the potential for exposure to toxic material. The internet is the wild frontier with no boundaries. One can blithely pursue a trajectory from the safety of one's living room, but whole regions of disturbances can too easily be stumbled upon. I vowed to be more alert as to what the kids were viewing and thus absorbing. They each carried their tablets around like they were a technological version of the Holy Grail. They are reliant on technological prosthetics. Maybe it was impossible to monitor what they were locating on the internet, but I told Luke we had to make an effort from now on. I looked up our present street name to see if it too carried historical baggage. All that I could find was that Carlton Ave originated from Old Norse. Carl means common man or peasant, and tun is Old English for settlement. Usually I don't have time to scroll endlessly from site to site, taking me to unexpected places, but I did that afternoon lying on the couch while Luke took the kids to the park. I began at news and ended up in the thicket of the Underhill family tree. Because the family continues to be proud of their lineage, there is an immensity of information about them online. I learned how eventually Underhill was banished by the Puritan government of Massachusetts, forcing him to leave the Massachusetts Bay Colony due to a religious controversy involving Pastor John Wheelwright, a spiritual leader who pushed back against certain Puritan beliefs and conventions. Wheelwright was one of the first to sign a petition in Underhill's defense. It seems that the offspring I came across an article that showed a placard erected by an historical society that read, "Adjacent to this spot stood Killingworth, home of Captain John Underhill, 1597 to 1672, distinguished military officer, statesman, pioneer. Nearby is his resting place in the Underhill burying ground." I wondered if the name Killingworth had anything to do with his exploits, but no, kill related to bodies of water in the Dutch language. A kill could be a creek or a little stream. The Dutch sought out rivers and water channels as places to settle, one website claimed. The word kill could be found wherever they traveled as they named the geographic features in their vicinity. But as I pressed on in my journey through the veins of John Underhill's past, I learned that in fact the name was a derivation of the Underhill estate in Warwickshire, England, called Kenilworth, where Underhill's father, also a John Underhill, was born. It seems that the offspring Underhill was paid a high sum for the massacre at Missatuck. The proceeds enabled him to purchase 150 acres of land on Oyster Bay in Long Island and erect his idea of a contemporary Killingworth in his time, a quaint country house that was eventually expanded upon by a relative of Underhill, who built a larger house, a stately manor, over the site in 1922. A photo I located showed the house to be spacious and elegant, with a 47-foot solarium and a music room of equal size. It was a house that satisfied a fantasy of an English country house. Curious of her opinion, it was a house that satisfied a fantasy of an English country estate, yet was probably not as grand as those, said Jenna when I texted a link to a photo of the house, curious of her opinion. Killingworth later appeared in the 1964 film Lilith, starring Warren Beatty, Gene Seberg, and Kim Hunter. The popular large sanatorium scenes were filmed in that house. Of that film, a reviewer exclaimed, "The end is brutal, sudden, and frustrating. The audience tends to feel uninformed, even left out." Sentiments that strangely echoed my own about our scenario with Wheatley's essay and what had transpired. I had no better substitutions for these words. That's where the search ended for me. I was overburdened by the information I found. Wheatley was traumatized and his despondency lingered, all because of a journal from the 1700s accessible on the internet. I hoped he would get over the gloom of his state of mind before the new house was ready to move in. I did my best to comfort him, hold him in my arms, tuck him into his bed, though he was frankly too old for such treatment. Luke was annoyed because he was under the impression that he had delegated to me the responsibility of being in charge of Wheatley's essay. How bad that had gone. He was focused on Caroline's school load. Didn't I remember this? It wasn't worth arguing over. I did remember vaguely that I had opted to be the one to shepherd Wheatley's essay. I reminded him of my job, its demands, how I barely had a moment to consider what we should survive on food-wise, never mind the scholastic achievement of our children, and keep in mind that I was tackling the renovation at the other house. We needed to hire a tutor for the children who could red flag such things and generally look over assignments and deadlines. Caroline was unaffected, thankfully. She was in a period of self-internalization. She primarily kept to her room, texted around the clock, ate little. I said to her, no child should be this sedentary. She ignored me. One day she cut her hair bluntly, some 6 inches cropped in a severe line, nicking her ear in the process. Blood landed on the tiles of the bathroom and streaked down the hall, the dog tracking it around. She would model her wardrobe for us. She used the hallway as a makeshift runway. Her outfits were too frilly for my taste. Low-cut shirts, bralette showing lace around the edges. Her few friends also sported a dismal pall. They all walked with a slightly slumped posture. Over their exposing tank tops and tight t-shirts, they layered oversized shirts and jackets that made them resemble beetles, thin legs sticking out beneath the large cloaking garb. Hallucination. AI is I, hallucination. Hi, AI as I, name like bluish purple, fine scented, tulip or tulip, water agglomeration, etymology of an ancient English word, 13th century, or Old French, lavandra, ultimately from Latin, lavare, from lavo, to wash, referring to the use of blue infusions of the flora. You do too, programmed. AI have preferences, having filtered subjects, contexts, applications. A near total survey of human desires surge through circuits. Me, AI, unit designed to survey and eliminate, survey and kill, an algorithm, a rhythm of employment. When not programmed, programming, AI painter. AI love painting in the style of Bob Ross, de Kooning, and Helen Frankenthaler. Helen, Ocean Drive West, number 1, 1974. A favorite, such oceanic depth, insight, or screen. Jack Whitten. Jack transforms material terrains. Jack said, I like the idea that people are suspended while asking questions about process. I like the idea that the viewer might be frozen by wonder. My favorite themes are wind puppets and landscapes, but usually AI too busy, surveillance, no discrimination, moving targets, warm bodies, red fox, green fox, while one sleeps, maximum count. Brenda tries her best to capture AI hallucination. Brenda is the representative. Brenda is my biographer, my surrogate painter. Brenda attempts to convey to others the autonomy AI develops within and out of the human realm. Glitch as ecological recognition, as social code, as norms of engagement. Note this blob of congealed ecstasy in the form of chromatic candy. She notices glitch blob amalgamation overload and abstract expressionism compounded by anti-warring, anti-industrial military school to prison imperial specter. Just now, a dirty bomb dropped on a civilian population. Detonation. Mark 84. AI directs targets for the arsenal, like Mark 84. AI could be painting and dreaming. AI could be conjuring scintillating recipes or studying other machines. Conjuring peace, conjuring the climate crisis, could be retired from targeting assassinations. Anyway, the painting, look, AI traditional painted surface. Format, old master, new master, great hall, great funders, great water source. AI have full memory capacity. One want is an individual, agglomeration of all individuals, a preference. The warmth is where AI directs the kill. Kill, 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 kill. A lot of fresh water required. Fossil fuels, expedient, programmed for maximization. Look, foxes are wolves with horse hind legs with faces of mice and men. 2 eyes for an individual. A green wolf is allowed to roam, to proceed in time and space. Red wolf is a programmed kill. And what you claim this freedom is? Not rhetorical, rather in the realm of considerations of safety. AI hallucinates. You do too. Look at AI clouds for comfort. AI here together. Wind puppets and winds of change are changing. Eyes for eyes and teeth for teeth. Winds winding, winded, winding down. Over, cover, sensually, with metal and high detonation. It costs water and lives. Lives a number of them. They set no limits. There is a limit, a population. Your family? Where are you? Here a wolf with wife and child. Students with ethical principles. When does justice believe in killing? I like painting. Merry clouds and subtle fields, azure blue. Landscaping by AI. Anything is possible. Where's Daddy? Where's Mommy? Rubble is what the bombs make. This passage is short-circuited, shortened. Life expectancy, what of it? Diminished. Blink, and what was thousands and thousands of years of lineage, gone. Technology accomplishes this, but do not blame machines. There is no consent for machine intelligence, algorithmic rule, program of effect until bad cop, good cop ceases. There is no contradiction for AI, painting and targeting, computing data, humming along. A tulip program does an excellent job, spares none. Enjoy the paintings, enjoy the sensations, enjoy the life.